Homeless woman offers to clean the pig pen for a bit of food. The farmer couldn't believe it. Michael Johnson stopped feeding the pigs when he heard hesitant footsteps approaching the pig pen. It was a hot Sunday morning in rural Wisconsin, and he wasn't expecting visitors at Pine Creek Farm. The woman who appeared at the pig pen fence carried an old dented bucket in her trembling hands. Her clothes were dirty and torn, her graying, disheveled hair partially covering a face marked by time and life's hardships. She approached cautiously, as if fearing she might be chased away at any moment. "Good morning, sir," she said in a hoarse voice that still carried a polite tone. I was passing by on the road and saw you had livestock here." Michael eyed her suspiciously. Strangers rarely showed up on the property, especially someone in such dire condition. He kept pouring corn into the trough without answering, waiting for her to explain what she wanted. "Would you need someone to clean the pig pen?" she continued, lifting the bucket slightly. "I know how to work with pigs. I learned when I was younger. You wouldn't have to pay me, just a small plate of food would do." The farmer finally turned to face her fully. There was something about her face that unsettled him, a disturbing familiarity he couldn't place. Her eyes had a peculiar greenish hue, and despite all the dirt and exhaustion, they held an expression that seemed oddly familiar. "I don't need help," he replied curtly, turning back to his work. "Please, sir," she insisted, stepping closer to the fence. "It's been 3 days since I've had a proper meal. I know it sounds strange, but I really do know pigs. I learned some special cleaning techniques on a farm near Madison where I grew up." Michael paused again. Madison. His mother had been born in Madison. He shook his head, annoyed at himself for making meaningless connections. Plenty of people were born in Madison. "Listen here," he said, finally walking toward the fence. "I don't usually hire people who show up out of nowhere. How do I know you won't steal anything?" The woman lowered her eyes, clearly hurt by the suggestion. "I understand your suspicion, but look at me." She spread her arms, showing her tattered clothes. "What kind of thief would I be? I don't even have a place to hide a chicken if I wanted to steal one." There was a painful honesty in her words that made Michael feel bad for being so harsh. He glanced around, noticing the pig pen really could use a thorough cleaning. Mrs. Jenkins, the housekeeper, had been complaining that her back couldn't handle the heavy work anymore. "All right," he relented, opening the gate, "but just for today, and I'll be watching." The relief on the woman's face was so intense, it made Michael uncomfortable. She stepped into the pen with surprising ease, greeting the pigs like old friends. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elizabeth," she replied, already filling the bucket from the water tank. "Mrs. Elizabeth." Michael watched as she got to work. Her movements were confident and efficient, no amateur. She knew exactly how to handle the animals, where to find the cleaning supplies he kept in the shed, and how to arrange the space to make the work easier. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now back to the story. As Elizabeth worked, she began humming a soft melody. It was an old tune, the kind mothers used to sing to their children at bedtime. Michael felt an involuntary shiver run down his spine. That melody. He knew that melody. It was the same song his mother used to sing to him as a child before she disappeared when he was just 7 years old. Beyond the Silver Stream, a lullaby that had left an indelible mark on his childhood. "What song is that?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Elizabeth abruptly stopped humming and focused even harder on her work, scrubbing the cement floor with unnecessary force. "I don't know, sir. Just a tune that popped into my head," she murmured without looking up. Michael didn't believe her answer. Something was off about the whole situation. A stranger who showed up out of nowhere, knew how to handle pigs like a pro, and was singing the same song his mother had sung 40 years ago. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Mrs. Jenkins was coming with a tray of snacks for him, as she did every morning. The housekeeper had worked at the farm for over 50 years, even before Michael was born. She'd been hired by his parents when she was just 20. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson," Mrs. Jenkins greeted, but she stopped abruptly when she saw Elizabeth in the pig pen. The tray trembled in her hands, and she visibly paled. "Jenkins, this is Mrs. Elizabeth. She's helping with cleaning today," Michael explained, noticing the housekeeper's strange reaction. Elizabeth lifted her face for the first time since Mrs. Jenkins arrived. The two women stared at each other for a long moment, the air thick with a tension Michael couldn't understand. Mrs. Jenkins quickly set the tray down and took a few steps back. I'll come back later," she stammered, turning to leave. "Hold on, Jenkins," Michael called, growing more intrigued. "Did something happen?" "No, sir, nothing at all. It's just, I remembered I left the beans on the stove," she lied blatantly, practically running back to the house. Michael looked from Elizabeth to where Mrs. Jenkins had disappeared. Something was going on here, and he was going to find out what. Elizabeth had returned to her work with even more determination, as if she wanted to become invisible. "Do you two know each other?" he asked directly. "No, sir," Elizabeth answered too quickly. "I've never seen her before in my life." But Michael noticed her hands trembling as she scrubbed the same spot over and over. He stepped closer, observing every detail of this mysterious woman. That's when he noticed something that made his heart race. In the torn pocket of Elizabeth's worn-out coat was a small embroidery. It wasn't just any embroidery. It was a specific floral pattern he recognized. His mother used to make embroideries exactly like that. He still kept a few pieces at home, carefully preserved in a box in the attic. "Where did you get that coat?" he asked, pointing to the pocket. Elizabeth looked down, saw the exposed embroidery, and immediately tried to cover it with her hand. It's mine, very old now." "Who made that embroidery?" "I did, a long time ago." Lie. Michael was sure it was a lie. That kind of embroidery was unique to his family. His mother had learned it from her grandmother, who in turn had learned it from her great-grandmother. It was a pattern passed down from mother to daughter for generations in the Johnson family. The house phone began to ring, interrupting his questioning. Michael hesitated, torn between answering the call and continuing to press Elizabeth. "Don't go anywhere," he said, pointing a finger at her. "I'll be right back." Elizabeth just nodded, but Michael noticed her nervously eyeing the farm entrance as if calculating her chances of escape. The call was from his wife, Sarah, who was in town shopping with the kids. She wanted to know if he needed anything from the store. Michael answered mechanically, his mind still fixed on the stranger in the pig pen. When he returned, he found Elizabeth standing in front of the barn, staring intently at something on the wall. Her eyes were moist, and her hands were clasped over her chest, as if she were revisiting painful memories. Michael followed her gaze and saw what had moved her so deeply. It was an old photograph, yellowed with time, pinned to the wooden wall of the barn. The picture showed his parents on their wedding day, young and smiling, in front of the town's main church. "Beautiful photo," Elizabeth remarked, her voice choked. "They're my parents," Michael said, watching her carefully. "Your mother was very pretty." "Yeah, she was." Elizabeth reached out a trembling hand and gently touched the bride's face in the photograph with a tenderness that seemed too intimate for a stranger. "She looks like someone I knew once," Elizabeth murmured. "Who?" "Someone from a long time ago. Someone who made a mistake and lost everything." Michael felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Pieces of an impossible puzzle were falling into place in his mind, forming a picture he refused to accept. "Elizabeth," he said slowly, "what mistake did this person make?" She jerked away from the photo as if shocked and quickly turned back toward the pig pen. "I don't know, sir. I think I've said too much already. I'd better finish my work." But Michael wasn't letting it go. He followed her, determined to get to the bottom of the story. "Elizabeth, answer me one thing. Have you ever been on this farm before?" "No, sir. Never." "Then how did you know where the tool shed was? How did you know there was a hose coiled behind the tank? How did you find the laundry detergent I keep on the top shelf?" Elizabeth stopped scrubbing the floor and froze like a cornered animal. I'm observant," she stammered. "Being observant doesn't explain you knowing there's a hidden faucet behind the shed wall. I never showed you that." The silence that followed was deafening. Elizabeth dropped the scrub brush and sank heavily onto an upturned bucket, covering her face with her hands. "Why did you come back?" Michael asked, his voice more of a desperate whisper than a question. Elizabeth lifted her face, and for the first time Michael saw tears streaking her dirty cheeks. "I shouldn't have come back," she said. "I know I shouldn't have. Answer my question, why did you come back?" "Because I couldn't live with the weight anymore," she sobbed. "Because 40 years have passed, and I still wake up every day thinking about the boy I abandoned." Michael's legs went weak. He leaned against the pigpen fence, the world spinning around him. Even with all his suspicions, hearing the confirmation felt like a punch to the gut. You're my mother." "I'm Elizabeth Johnson. I was married to Robert Johnson. I was the mother of Michael Johnson," she said, as if reciting a painful lesson. "I was all those things until the day I ruined everything and lost the right to be anything." Michael slid down the fence until he was sitting on the ground. 40 years. 40 years of anger, of pain, of unanswered questions. 40 years wondering why his mother had vanished like smoke, leaving only a note saying she had to leave. "Why?" was all he managed to ask. Elizabeth wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her tattered coat. "Because I found out your father was cheating on me. I found letters he was getting from another woman. Love letters, Michael. Letters that said things he never said to me." "And that's why you abandoned me too?" "I was pregnant," she continued, as if she hadn't heard the question. "I was expecting a little brother for you. When I found out about the affair, I lost my mind. One night, I took you while you were sleeping, put you in the car and just drove. I wanted to go to my sister's house in Chicago." Michael Johnson vaguely remembered that night. He had woken up in the back seat of the car, his mother crying at the wheel, rain beating against the window. She had said they were going for a drive. "But on the road I started bleeding. So much blood, Michael. I had to stop at a hospital in Kenosha. They told me I was losing the baby. And me. What happened to me? You stayed in the hospital waiting room, sleeping in a chair while I fought not to die in the operating room. When I came out of surgery, it was already dawn. I looked at you there, so small, so innocent, and realized the monstrosity of what I was doing." Elizabeth stood up and walked to the fence, gazing at the house where Michael had grown up. "I called your father, told him where you were. He arrived in 2 hours, desperate, crying. When he saw me, he hugged me and begged for forgiveness. He said the letters were old from before our marriage, that he had kept them out of foolishness but had never betrayed me." "Then why didn't you come back home?" "Because I had lost the baby. Because I had dragged you out of bed in the middle of the night over my jealousy. Because I had almost killed my son over my madness." Her voice broke. "How could I go back after that? How could I look at your face every day and remember what I'd done?" Michael slowly stood up, trying to process all that information. His entire life had been built on the belief that his mother had abandoned them because she didn't love them. Discovering she had left because she loved them too much, because she felt unworthy of staying, changed everything. "So you left us thinking we were the problem." "I left a note for your father explaining everything. I said you deserved someone better than me, someone who wasn't crazy enough to put a child at risk over jealousy. My father never showed me that note, because I asked him not to. I said when you grew up, if you ever asked, he could tell you the truth. But while you were a child, it was better for you to hate me than blame yourself for my leaving." A heavy silence settled between them. Michael looked at that broken woman, trying to see in her the loving, cheerful mother he remembered. It was impossible to reconcile the two images. "Where have you been all these years? Working, surviving, trying to forget." "I lived in Chicago, Los Angeles, Milwaukee. I worked as a maid, a sales clerk, a cleaner, anything to keep from having time to think." "Did you never want to come back?" "I wanted to every single day. But then I heard your father had remarried. Mrs. Jenkins wrote to me sometimes telling me how you were doing. She said you had gained a new mother, that you were happy." Michael thought of Mrs. Catherine, the woman his father had married when he was 10. She had been a good stepmother, kind and present, but she had never fully filled the void left by Elizabeth. "Catherine passed away 5 years ago," he said. Elizabeth closed her eyes, absorbing the news. "Jenkins told me. That's why I came back. I thought maybe now you were old enough to understand." or at least to give me the chance to apologize before I left for good. Left for where? Anywhere. I'm sick, Michael. The doctors said I don't have much time. I just wanted to see you once, know if you'd become a good man, ask for forgiveness, and go. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Michael felt as if someone had punched him. She was sick. He had just found his mother and was about to lose her again. What kind of illness? Cancer. In my lungs. I started smoking after I left here. To calm my nerves. I could never quit. Michael looked at her with new eyes. Now he noticed how thin she was, how her skin had a sickly pallor, how her breathing seemed labored. Are you getting treatment? I don't have money for treatment. And even if I did, what for? I have nothing left to live for. You have me. The words left Michael's mouth before he even realized he was going to say them. Elizabeth looked at him with an expression of shock and hope mixed together. Michael, you have me, he repeated more firmly. You have your grandchildren too. I have 2 children, Mum. Ethan and Emma. They're 13 and 11. Elizabeth covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes overflowing with tears. I have grandchildren? Yes. And they'll want to meet their grandmother. But what about your wife and your family? What will they think of me? That's my problem. You're my mother, that's it. Mrs. Jenkins appeared at the entrance of the Pigpen, carrying a chair and a glass of water. She had been watching from a distance, clearly waiting for the right moment to approach. I'm sorry for running off earlier, Mrs. Elizabeth, she said, handing her the glass of water. It was just such a shock to see you. Elizabeth accepted the water with trembling hands. Thank you, Jenkins. You've always been so kind to me. You remember me? How could I forget? You took care of Michael when I couldn't. You were the mother I should have been. Jenkins shook her head vigorously. No, Mrs. Elizabeth, I took care of him, but I could never replace you. He always missed you, always asked why his mommy didn't come back. Michael looked at Jenkins, surprised. She had never told him that. It's true, Mr. Michael. When you were little, every night before bed, you'd ask if Mommy was coming back the next day. I'd say yes, because I didn't have the heart to tell you the truth. Why did you never tell me this? Michael asked. Because your father asked me not to. He thought it was better for you to forget little by little. But a child doesn't forget their mother. No. Elizabeth stood from the chair and walked toward Michael. She hesitantly reached out toward his face, as if asking permission. Michael didn't pull away. When she touched his face, he felt the rough, calloused skin of someone who had worked hard their whole life. But he also felt the tenderness and gentleness that only a mother could have. You've grown into a handsome man, she whispered, just like your father when he was young. Do you want to meet your grandchildren? Can I? Of course you can. They're on their way from the city with Sarah. Elizabeth stepped back, suddenly nervous. I don't know if that's a good idea. Look at me. Your wife will be horrified. Sarah is a good person. She'll understand. And if she doesn't? If she doesn't want me near the children? Michael took her hands in his. Then we'll talk. We'll explain. Give her time to adjust. But you're not leaving again, Mom. Not now that I've found you. Mrs. Jenkins wiped her eyes with her apron. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to prepare a special lunch. It's been so long since I cooked for Mrs. Elizabeth. She walked toward the house, murmuring to herself about what dishes to make. Michael and Elizabeth were alone again, trying to process the enormity of what was happening. Michael, I need to tell you something, Elizabeth said. When I found out you'd gotten married and had children through Jenkins' letters, I was so happy. But I was also terrified. Terrified of what? Terrified that you'd be like me. That you might abandon your family over some foolish reason too. I would never do that. I thought the same about myself. You never know what you're capable of when you're desperate. Michael reflected on those words. He truly believed he would never abandon Sarah and the kids. But could there ever come a day when he might be tested beyond his limits? Mom, I need to ask you something. Do you still love my dad? Elizabeth smiled for the first time since she had arrived. "Is your father doing well? Jenkins told me he remarried, but I never knew if he was happy." "He passed away 8 years ago." The smile vanished instantly from Elizabeth's face. She leaned against the fence as if she had been struck physically. "How?" "A heart attack. It was quick. He didn't suffer." Elizabeth began to cry again, this time with deep, desperate pain. "I never got to ask for his forgiveness. I never got to tell him I understood he wasn't betraying me. I never got to say I loved him until the last day of my life." Michael held her, feeling how fragile and thin she was. It was like hugging a rag doll. "He knew, Mum. He knew you loved him." "How can you be sure?" "Because he never held a grudge. Because he spoke of you fondly. Because he kept all your things in the attic, as if he expected you to come back any moment." Elizabeth pulled away from the embrace, looking at Michael in disbelief. "He kept my things." "He did. Your dresses, your jewelry, your books. Even the embroidery you used to make. Everything is still there, preserved as if you'd left yesterday." Can I see them?" "Of course. After lunch, we'll go up there." The sound of an approaching car interrupted the conversation. It was Sarah's Toyota Camry returning from town. Michael's stomach tightened. How was he going to explain to his wife that the disheveled woman by the Pigpen was his mother? "Michael, I think I should leave," Elizabeth said, clearly terrified. "I don't want to cause trouble in your marriage." "You're not going anywhere. Sarah will understand." But Michael wasn't so sure. Sarah was a practical, organized woman. She didn't like surprises or situations beyond her control. Discovering that the mother-in-law she thought had been gone for 40 years had suddenly appeared like a beggar certainly wasn't part of her plans for the day. The car stopped in front of the house, and Michael heard the cheerful voices of their children arguing about which movie to watch that afternoon. Ethan and Emma ran out of the car, arms full of shopping bags, and went straight inside. Sarah stayed in the car a little longer, likely checking her shopping list. "Come with me," Michael said, taking Elizabeth by the arm. "Let's talk to her." "Michael, I'm scared." "So am I, but we'll face this together." They walked slowly toward the house. Michael could feel Elizabeth trembling beside him. As they approached the car, Sarah finally stepped out, smoothing her hair after removing her seatbelt. Sarah was a beautiful woman of 42, her brown hair always neatly styled, her clothes simple but always clean and pressed. She and Michael had known each other since their teens and had been married for 15 years. "Hi, honey," she greeted, kissing her husband on the cheek. "I got everything on the list. I even found that fertilizer you wanted for..." She stopped when she noticed Elizabeth standing a few feet behind. "Who is this woman?" Michael took a deep breath. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. Let's sit on the porch." "Michael, what's going on? Why do you look like that?" "Please, let's sit. I'll explain everything." Sarah glanced suspiciously from Michael to Elizabeth, who kept her eyes lowered. She agreed to sit on the porch, but Michael could tell from her body language that she was bracing for bad news. "Sarah, this is Elizabeth. She's my mother." Sarah blinked several times, as if she hadn't understood. "What do you mean, your mother? Your mother died when you were a child." "She didn't die, she left, and now she's back." Sarah stared at Elizabeth with an expression of shock and confusion. "But how? Where has she been all this time? Why did she come back now?" Michael told the whole story to Sarah, from Elizabeth's appearance in the Pigpen to the revelation about her illness. Throughout the account, Sarah remained silent, only glancing back and forth between Michael and Elizabeth. When Michael finished speaking, a heavy silence settled over the porch. Sarah stood up and walked to the edge, turning her back to them. "Sarah?" Michael called. "I need some time to process this," she said without turning around. "It's just too much all at once." "I understand, but she's sick, Sarah. She doesn't have much time." "Michael, I'm not questioning that. I'm just trying to figure out how our lives completely changed in one morning." Elizabeth rose from her chair. "I'll leave," as she said. "I don't want to cause trouble for your family." "No," Sarah said, quickly turning around. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be rude. It's just been a huge shock. She stepped closer to Elizabeth and studied her carefully. You really do look like Michael, she admitted, especially the eyes. I know it's hard to accept, Elizabeth said. I know I must seem like a crazy woman showing up out of nowhere. Do you have somewhere to stay? No, I don't. I've been sleeping at the bus station. Sarah looked at Michael, who was clearly waiting for her to make the decision. Well, she finally said, I guess we can't let our children's grandmother sleep at the bus station. Michael felt an immense relief wash over him. But, Sarah continued, let's do this right. You'll take a bath, put on clean clothes, and we'll talk calmly about all of this. Especially about how we'll explain it to the kids. Elizabeth began crying again. Thank you, she managed between sobs. Thank you for not turning me away. You're Michael's mother. That's enough for me, at least for now. Mrs. Jenkins appeared on the porch, carrying a tray with coffee and cake. Mrs. Sarah, I prepared the guest room for Mrs. Elizabeth. I laid out clean clothes on the bed and drew a warm bath. Michael looked at Mrs. Jenkins in surprise. She had arranged everything as if she knew exactly what would happen. Jenkins, you always knew she'd come back, didn't you? I hoped every day, Mr. Michael. A mother always comes home sooner or later. Sarah gently took Elizabeth's arm. Come with me. Let's get you more comfortable, and then we'll talk everything over more calmly. The two women went inside, leaving Michael alone on the porch with Mrs. Jenkins. Mr. Michael, may I say something? Of course, Jenkins. Your mother suffered all these years. From the letters she sent me, I knew she never forgave herself for leaving. Be patient with her. And Sarah, how will she react when reality sinks in? Mrs. Sarah is a good woman. She'll understand. It might not be easy at first, but she'll understand. And the kids? How do I explain to Ethan and Emma that the grandmother they thought didn't exist suddenly appeared? Children handle these things better than adults. They'll be curious, they'll ask lots of questions, but they'll accept it. Michael hoped Mrs. Jenkins was right. He looked toward the house, imagining Elizabeth bathing in the guest bathroom, wearing clean clothes for the first time in weeks. It was too surreal to be true. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. About an hour later, Sarah came downstairs with Elizabeth. The transformation was striking. Clean and dressed properly, Elizabeth looked at least 10 years younger. She wore a simple blue dress of Sarah's, which hung a little loose on her, but dignity had returned to her bearing. Wow, Michael said, standing up. You look like the mother I remember. Elizabeth smiled timidly. Sarah lent me this pretty dress. It had been so long since I felt human. You're a very beautiful woman, Sarah said sincerely. You just needed a little care. At that moment, Ethan and Emma came running down the stairs, arguing about which game to play on the console. When they saw the stranger in the living room, they stopped abruptly. Dad, who is this lady? Asked Emma, who at 11 was extremely curious. Michael looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. Kids, come here. I have something very important to tell you. Ethan and Emma approached, clearly intrigued. Michael knelt to their level. Remember how I always said my mother left when I was little? I remember, Ethan said. You told us she had to travel far away. That's right. Well, she's back from her trip. This is Grandma Elizabeth, my mother. The children stared at Elizabeth with wide eyes. Really? Emma asked. You're our real grandma? Elizabeth knelt as well, meeting their gaze. Yes, my dear. I'm your real grandma. But why were you gone for so long? Ethan asked. Because I got lost, Elizabeth replied. I was lost for a long time and couldn't find my way back home. And now you found it? Now I did. Thanks to your father, who helped me find the way. Emma, always the more affectionate of the two, stepped closer to Elizabeth. Are you going to live with us now? Elizabeth glanced at Michael and Sarah, unsure how to answer. For now, yes, Sarah said. Grandma Elizabeth will stay with us for a while. Ethan, ever the practical one, asked the question everyone had been avoiding. "Grandma, are you sick? You look really thin." Michael was about to step in, but Elizabeth raised her hand. "I am, my dear. I've been a little sick. But now that I've found my family again, I'll get better." "We'll take care of you," Emma said, taking Elizabeth's hand. "Right, Mom?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed, her voice slightly choked. Lunch was an unusual experience for everyone. Mrs. Jenkins had prepared all of Elizabeth's favorite dishes, as if 40 years hadn't passed. Elizabeth ate little, clearly still unaccustomed to hearty meals, but she praised each dish with such enthusiasm that Mrs. Jenkins cried with joy. The children bombarded Elizabeth with questions: where she had been, what places she'd seen, what languages she'd learned. Elizabeth answered patiently, making up stories that wouldn't hurt their innocence. After lunch, Michael took Elizabeth to see the attic where her belongings had been stored. Climbing the steep stairs was difficult for her, and she paused every few steps to catch her breath. When Michael opened the attic door and turned on the light, Elizabeth let out a muffled gasp. There were all her things, carefully packed in labeled boxes: her wardrobe, her jewelry, her books, her embroidery. "Robert kept all this?" she asked, gently touching a box marked Elizabeth's dresses. "He did, and when he passed I kept saving them. I don't know why. Maybe part of me always knew you'd come back." Elizabeth opened the dress box and pulled out a navy blue one with white polka dots. It was the dress she used to wear to church on Sundays. "This was my favorite," she said, holding it against her body. "Robert always said I looked pretty in it." "Wear it," Michael suggested. "I don't know if it still fits. I've lost so much weight over the years." "Try it." Elizabeth took the dress and a few other pieces. Minutes later, she had changed. The dress was loose, but it still looked lovely on her. "How do I look?" she asked, slowly turning. "You look like the mother I remember," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. They came down from the attic and found Sarah in the kitchen, preparing a snack for the children. When she saw Elizabeth in the dress, she stopped what she was doing. "Oh, Mrs. Elizabeth, you look beautiful." "Thank you, dear. It's nice to wear pretty clothes again." Sarah dried her hands on the dish towel and turned to Elizabeth. "Mrs. Elizabeth, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Michael tensed, afraid Sarah might confront Elizabeth about something unpleasant. "Go ahead. Do you really plan to stay, or will you leave again when you get tired?" Elizabeth looked Sarah straight in the eyes. "Sarah, I won't lie to you. I'm dying. The doctors gave me 6 months at most. I didn't come here to disrupt your lives. I came to say goodbye to my son and to die in peace. And now? Now that you've seen he has a family? Now I want to stay until the end, if you'll let me. I want to meet my grandchildren, help however I can, be useful. But most of all, I want to show Michael that I never stopped loving him, not even for a second." Sarah studied Elizabeth's face for a long moment. "Then we'll face this illness together. We'll find the best treatment, fight until the end. Sarah, I don't have the money to—" "We do, and even if we didn't, we'd find a way." Michael felt a wave of love for his wife. Sarah could be practical and sometimes tough, but deep down, she had a heart of gold. That evening, Elizabeth had dinner with the family for the first time in 40 years. The children had already grown used to her presence and treated her as if she'd always been there. After dinner, Elizabeth helped Sarah wash the dishes, insisting she wanted to feel useful. Michael watched them from the kitchen table, still hardly believing this domestic scene was really happening. "Michael," Elizabeth called, without stopping to dry the plates. "Can you tell me about your father? How was he after I left?" Michael thought for a moment before answering. "He was very sad at first, drank more than he should have. Jenkins told me he cried in secret, especially on important dates like your birthday or Mother's Day." Elizabeth stopped drying the plate in her hands. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted him to suffer. But he recovered. He met Mrs. Catherine when I was 10. She was a teacher here in town. They got married and were happy together." "Did he love her?" Michael hesitated. It was a complicated question. "He cared for her deeply. She was a good wife and a good stepmother to me. But I think he never completely forgot you." "What do you mean?" "Once, about 5 years before he died, I caught him in the attic going through your things. He was flipping through a photo album of you. When he saw me, He got embarrassed and said he was looking for some documents. Elizabeth began to cry silently. I never forgot him either. Even when I tried to convince myself I hated him for betraying me, I knew I still loved him. Mom, do you want to visit his grave tomorrow? May I? Of course. We can go in the morning before the kids wake up. Sarah finished putting away the dishes and joined the conversation. Mrs. Elizabeth, tomorrow afternoon, I'd like to take you to the doctor. I want a specialist to examine you and see what our treatment options are. Sarah, I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden, you're family now. That night, Elizabeth slept in the house for the first time in 40 years. Michael checked the guest room 3 times, afraid she might have left in the middle of the night like a fading dream. The 3rd time he peeked in, Elizabeth was awake, sitting on the bed and looking out the window. Can't sleep? He asked. I can't believe this is real, she replied. I'm afraid to fall asleep and wake up at the bus station, only to find out this was all a dream. Michael walked into the room and sat in the armchair beside the bed. It's not a dream, Mom. You're home. Michael, I need to ask you something. Anything. If I get much worse, if the illness becomes too ugly, I want you to promise you won't let the children see me suffering. Let's not talk about that now. Please, promise me? Michael sighed. I promise. But you have to promise me too that you'll fight, that you'll follow the treatment properly. I promise. The next morning, Michael and Elizabeth went to the cemetery to visit Robert's grave. Elizabeth brought a bouquet of flowers she had picked from the farm's garden, daisies which had been her husband's favorite. When they reached the grave, Elizabeth knelt on the grass and placed the flowers in the vase. Then she stayed silent for several minutes, just looking at the headstone. Robert, she finally said, I came to ask for your forgiveness. I know you can't hear me, but I need to say it. Michael took a few steps back, giving his mother privacy. I was foolish, Robert, foolish and jealous, and you never gave me any reason to doubt you. But I was so insecure, so afraid of losing you, that I ended up losing you anyway. She gently touched the photo on the headstone. Our son has become a wonderful man. He has a good wife, beautiful children. You'd be proud of him. I'm proud too, even though I don't deserve to be. The wind rustled the trees around them, and Elizabeth took it as a response. I always loved you, Robert. Even when I was angry, even when I tried to forget you, you were the only man in my life. Michael stepped closer and placed a hand on her shoulder. He forgave you, Mom. I'm sure of it. How can you be so sure? Because if he hadn't forgiven you, he wouldn't have kept your things. He wouldn't have spoken of you with such warmth. Dad loved you and love forgives. That afternoon, Sarah took Elizabeth to the doctor as promised. Dr. Miller was an oncologist with an office in town. He examined Elizabeth carefully and ordered several tests. Mrs. Elizabeth, he said after the appointment, you're in a delicate situation, but it's not the end of the world. With proper treatment, we can at least ensure more time and a better quality of life. How much time? Elizabeth asked directly. It's hard to say without the test results, but if you follow the treatment closely, we could be looking at 1, maybe 2 years, perhaps more. Sarah took Elizabeth's hand. See? Don't give up before you've even fought. But the treatment is so expensive. Let us worry about that, Sarah said firmly. When they got home, Michael was waiting on the porch with the children. Emma ran to hug Elizabeth as soon as she stepped out of the car. So, Grandma, what did the doctor say? He said I'll get better if I take my medicine properly, Elizabeth lied partly. That's great, Emma cheered. Then you can teach me how to embroider like Aunt Jenkins said you knew how. You want to learn embroidery? Yes, and I also want you to teach me how to make that cake. Dad said you used to bake for him when he was little. Elizabeth looked at Michael, surprised. You remember my cornmeal cake? I remember everything, Mom. The cake, the stories you told, the songs you sang. Then tomorrow we'll bake a cake, Elizabeth promised Emma. That night, after the children went to bed, Michael, Sarah, and Elizabeth sat on the porch to discuss the next steps. Elizabeth would need chemotherapy twice a week, which meant frequent trips to town. I can take you every time, Sarah offered. My job is flexible. Sarah was an accountant and mostly worked from home, so she truly had flexible hours. "Sarah, why are you being so kind to me?" asked Elizabeth. "I'm a stranger who came out of nowhere and turned your life upside down." "Because I see how happy Michael has been since you arrived," Sarah replied honestly. "He smiles more, talks more. All these years of marriage, I always felt there was a part of him that was sad, hurt. Now that part is healing." "But aren't you afraid I'll get in the way?" "I'm afraid. I'm afraid you'll get better and then decide to leave again. I'm afraid Michael will suffer all over again. I'm afraid the kids will get attached and then lose their grandmother once more." Elizabeth understood Sarah's fears perfectly. "Sarah, I'll make a vow to you here and now. As long as I'm alive, I won't leave again. There may come a day when I have no choice because of the illness, but as long as it's up to me, I'm staying. And what if one day you grow tired of us? If living together becomes too hard?" "It won't. I know it won't. You've given me more in 2 weeks than I had in 40 years. You've given me a family again." Michael listened to the conversation in silence, moved by the maturity with which the two most important women in his life were handling the situation. The following day settled into a new routine at Pine Creek Farm. Elizabeth woke early and helped Mrs. Jenkins with the housework. Her years of experience as a housekeeper made her very efficient, and she insisted on contributing however she could. Sarah took her to chemotherapy twice a week. At first, Elizabeth would return from treatments very weak, but little by little she grew accustomed to them. Sarah always brought a book and waited in the lobby, knitting or reading. The children adjusted quickly to their grandmother's presence. Emma had grown especially close to Elizabeth, who taught her embroidery on Sunday afternoons. Ethan, more reserved, loved listening to the stories Elizabeth told about her travels, edited versions of her experiences during the years she was away. One afternoon, about a month after Elizabeth's arrival, Michael found her in the garden tending to the flowers. She had grown even thinner from the chemotherapy, but seemed emotionally stronger. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better than I have in a long time," she replied, pruning a rosebush. "Michael, I need to tell you something." Michael sat down on the garden bench, preparing to listen. "When I left 40 years ago, I hadn't planned on staying away so long. My plan was to spend a few months at my sister's place in Chicago, clear my head, and then come back. What happened? My sister died 3 months after I got there. Sudden cancer. Just like that, I was alone in a big city, knowing no one, with no money, no prospects." Michael frowned. Elizabeth had never mentioned her sister before. "Did you ever try to come back after that?" "I tried once, 5 years after I left. I managed to save up for a bus ticket and came back here. But when I got to town and heard your father had remarried and that you were happy, I lost my nerve. You were here and didn't look for me." "I was. I stayed 3 days at Mrs. Wilson's boarding house on the street behind the church. I saw you leaving school one afternoon. You were laughing with friends. You looked so happy. I thought if I showed up, I'd only cause trouble." Michael felt a mix of anger and sadness. She had been so close, and he hadn't even known. "Mom, you had no right to decide that on your own. I had a right to know you were okay, that you were alive." "I know. It was just another wrong decision in a life full of wrong decisions." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I don't want to die with secrets between us. I want you to know the whole truth, even the ugly parts." Michael took her hand, noticing how cold and thin it was. "It doesn't matter anymore, Mom. What matters is that you're here now. Michael, if one day it's when I'm no longer here, I want you to tell the children the truth. Don't make up pretty stories about me. Tell them I was a coward, that I made mistakes. But in the end, I came back because my love for my family was stronger than my fear." "Okay, Mom, I promise." That evening during dinner, Elizabeth made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I want to invite you all to a party." "What kind of party?" asked Emma, always excited about celebrations. "A party to celebrate my return home. I want to invite the neighbors, your friends, the whole community. I want everyone to know that Elizabeth Johnson is back and proud of the family she has." Michael and Sarah exchanged glances. Elizabeth barely knew the neighbors, and many in town would still remember the scandal from 40 years ago. "Mum, are you sure? People will talk. They'll ask questions. Let them talk. Let them ask. I have nothing left to hide. I want everyone to see that I've come back to stay, that I'm no longer the cowardly woman who ran away once." Sarah immediately supported the idea. "I think it's wonderful. Let's throw a beautiful party. Next weekend?" "That works," Elizabeth agreed. "Jenkins, will you help me organize it?" "Of course, Mrs. Elizabeth. It'll be a party like no one's seen in a long time on this farm." The preparations for the party kept the whole family busy. Elizabeth insisted on making the desserts and appetizers herself, even when Sarah offered to order everything ready-made. She wanted her own food to be served, wanted to show she still knew how to care for her family. Ethan and Emma helped with the invitations, which Michael and Sarah delivered in person. The reactions were mixed. Some neighbors were curious and excited, others clearly wary. On the day of the party, Elizabeth woke up early and spent hours getting ready. She wore one of her old dresses, which Sarah had adjusted to her new size, and put on red lipstick she hadn't worn in decades. "How do I look?" she asked Michael before the guests arrived. "You're beautiful, Mom, just like the woman who raised me." The first guests arrived in the mid-afternoon. It was the Wilsons, neighbors from the farm next door. They had known Elizabeth before and were visibly moved to see her again. "Elizabeth!" exclaimed Mrs. Barbara Wilson, hugging her warmly. "How wonderful to see you back. We've missed you all these years." "Thank you, Barbara. It's good to be back." "Where were you? What happened? Why did it take so long for you to return?" Michael was about to step in, but Elizabeth raised her hand. "Barbara, I made a mistake a long time ago. A terrible mistake that cost me 40 years away from my family. But now I'm back, and that's all that matters." More people arrived, and Elizabeth patiently answered the same questions over and over. She didn't go into details, but she didn't avoid them either. Her honesty and simplicity slowly won over even the most skeptical guests. The town's priest, Father Thomas, arrived in the late afternoon. He was new to the parish and didn't know Elizabeth's story, which made things easier. "Mrs. Elizabeth," he said, "Michael told me you've returned from a long journey. It must be good to be home again." "It is, Father. Sometimes you have to get lost to find out where you truly belong." "Wise words. Do you plan to rejoin the community? We're always in need of volunteers for church work." Elizabeth looked at Michael, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd love to, Father. I have a lot of lost time to make up for." The party lasted well into the night. Elizabeth was clearly exhausted, but she refused to rest. She wanted to speak to every person, hear about the changes in town, and talk about her grandchildren. When the last guest had left, Elizabeth sank into a chair on the porch. "Was it worth it?" asked Sarah, sitting beside her. "It was. Now the whole town knows I'm back. I won't have to hide or feel ashamed anymore." "You should never have felt ashamed," said Michael. "Everyone makes mistakes." "Not all mistakes cost 40 years of your life, Michael." Emma appeared on the porch, already in her pajamas. "Grandma, you're not leaving ever again, right?" Elizabeth pulled her granddaughter onto her lap, even though she barely had the strength. "Never again, my dear. Grandma learned that her place is here with you." The following months settled into a peaceful routine at Pine Creek Farm. Elizabeth continued her treatment religiously, and surprisingly, her condition stabilized. The doctors were optimistic and spoke of remission. Elizabeth became actively involved in the community. She helped at church, attended school parent meetings, and had befriended several neighbors. It was as if the 40 lost years were just a bad dream that had passed. One morning, about 6 months after her arrival, Elizabeth woke Michael very early. "Michael, I need to talk to you." He went downstairs to the kitchen and found Elizabeth making coffee, as she did every morning. "What is it, Mom?" "I want to change my will." Michael frowned. Elizabeth had nothing to leave in a will. "What will?" "What I'm going to do. I want to leave a letter for the children explaining everything. I want them to know the truth when they're older." "Mom, you're fine. All your tests are normal." "I know, but I won't live forever, Michael. And when I go, I want it to be in peace, knowing I didn't leave anything unclear." Michael understood. Elizabeth was finally making peace with her own story. "Do you want help writing it?" I want you to read it before I put it away, to make sure I didn't forget anything important." Elizabeth spent the next few days writing a long letter to her grandchildren. She told her whole story, from her marriage to Robert to her return to Pine Creek Farm. It was an honest account, sparing no self-criticism but also without playing the victim. When Michael read the letter, he was moved by the maturity and wisdom his mother had gained through years of suffering. "It's perfect, Mom. Now I can die in peace." "Don't say that. You'll live a long time yet." "Michael, I need to confess something." "What is it?" "I don't plan on dying anytime soon. I plan to live long enough to see my grandchildren grow up, to meet my great-grandchildren, to annoy all of you for many more years." Michael laughed, relieved. "Good, because we don't plan on letting you go that easily." A year after Elizabeth's return, the family celebrated a special anniversary, not her birthday, but the anniversary of her homecoming. It was Elizabeth who suggested the celebration. "I want to celebrate the day I stopped being a coward and came home," she said. The gathering was smaller than the first, just family and close friends. But it was more emotional because now Elizabeth truly belonged. She was no longer the stranger who had returned. During the celebration, Elizabeth gave a speech that moved everyone. "A year ago, I was a woman with no home, no hope, no future. I thought my life had ended long ago, but I learned it's never too late to come home. Never too late to ask for forgiveness, never too late to start over." She looked at each family member before continuing. "Michael, thank you for giving me a second chance. Sarah, thank you for opening your home and heart to a mother-in-law who appeared out of nowhere. Ethan and Emma, thank you for teaching me that love has no age limit." The children rushed to hug her, and soon the whole family was in a group embrace. "Ann Jenkins," Elizabeth turned to the faithful housekeeper, "thank you for never giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." The gathering ended with Elizabeth telling stories to the children as she did every night. But this time, the stories were about the future she planned to live with them, not the past that haunted her. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Michael and Elizabeth stayed on the porch talking about life. "Michael, have you really forgiven me? Truly?" "I have, Mom. The moment you showed up at the pig pen, I'd already forgiven you. The rest was just learning to trust again. And do you trust me?" "I do. You've proven you've changed, that you've grown, that you've learned." "Michael, can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" "Of course. When I was on the streets, sleeping in shelters, going hungry, I often thought about giving up completely. What kept me alive all those years was the hope of seeing you again someday." Michael felt tears welling in his eyes. "Then why didn't you come back sooner?" "Because I was afraid you'd hate me, afraid you wouldn't want to see me. It was easier to live with the hope that maybe you'd forgive me than to risk finding out you hated me." "I could never hate you, Mom. I might have been hurt, I might have been confused, but hate, never. I know that now, but back then the guilt wouldn't let me think straight." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the country night. "Michael, do you think your father would be proud of how you welcomed me back?" "I'm sure he would. Dad was always a good man. He'd be happy to know we found a way to forgive each other. I visit his grave every week, you know." "I know. Jenkins told me. I talk to him, tell him how you're doing, how the kids are growing. Sometimes I feel like he hears me." "Maybe he does. You believe that?" "I believe that those who love us never stop watching over us, even after life." Elizabeth smiled, the first time Michael had seen her smile while talking about Robert. "Then he's watching over all of us." "He definitely is." 2 years after Elizabeth's return, the doctors delivered the news the whole family had hoped for. The cancer was in complete remission. Elizabeth was cured. The celebration was quiet but heartfelt. She had overcome not just the physical illness, but the emotional one that had eaten at her for decades. "You know what this means?" she said to Michael. "It means I'll get to see Emma graduate, see Ethan become a man, maybe even meet my great-grandchildren." "It means our family is whole again," Michael replied. "Michael, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When I die, even if it's many years from now, I want to be buried beside your father. Do you think that's possible?" Of course it is. You're his wife. But what about Catherine? Catherine is buried in her family's plot. She insisted on it when she was ill. She said you had the right to return to your place beside Dad. Elizabeth began to cry, but this time they were tears of gratitude. She really was a good woman. She was. And she knew you still loved Dad, and that he still loved you. How did she know? Because she was wise, and because those who truly love don't hold the past against you. Elizabeth lived 10 more years after her return. 10 full, intense years filled with joy and love. She saw Emma graduate as a teacher, saw Ethan marry and have children. She met her great-grandchildren and spoiled them as only a great-grandmother could. She passed away peacefully in her sleep on a Sunday morning. Michael found her with a smile on her face, as if she'd been having a sweet dream. The funeral was a testament to how deeply Elizabeth had been embraced by the community. The church was packed, and people from all over the region came to say goodbye. Emma, now grown, gave a moving speech during the ceremony. My grandmother taught me that it's never too late to come home, that love is stronger than guilt, that courage is more important than pride. She lived only half her life with us, but she managed to give us enough love for a lifetime. Elizabeth was buried beside Robert, as she had always wished. On the headstone, Michael had engraved, Elizabeth Johnson, beloved wife, mother and grandmother. She left, but she returned. She was lost, but she found herself. She loved, was loved, and will be remembered forever. Years later, when Elizabeth's grandchildren had children of their own, the story of the woman who offered to wash the pigpen in exchange for food and discovered she was home became a family legend. It was told at holiday gatherings, birthdays, and important moments. A story about forgiveness, second chances, and how true love always finds a way back home. Michael, now an elderly man, would always end the story the same way. And so my mother learned that no matter how long you've been lost, no matter how many mistakes you've made, if you have the courage to come back and ask for forgiveness, if you have the humility to start over from scratch, your family will always be waiting for you. Pine Creek Farm remained in the family for generations. The pig pen where it all began was preserved as a small memorial. A simple plaque read, "Here Elizabeth came home." And every time someone faced hardships, every time someone felt lost or hopeless, the family would tell the story of the woman who offered to wash a pig pen for a plate of food and discovered that sometimes you have to start from the lowest place to reach the highest. Elizabeth's story became a symbol in their small town, a symbol that it's never too late to come home, never too late to start over, and never too late to discover that true love doesn't fade with time. It just waits patiently for our courage to seek it. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story of reunion and forgiveness. Do you believe Elizabeth made the right choice by coming back? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.